On the business side, we are really comfortable. We are very happy where it is. And that gives us, added incentive and possibly a little bit of a headroom for us to kind of sit back and say, can we do something really big? Can we do something adventurous?
Welcome back to the show. And today I've got Tridib Roy Chowdhury. He's the General Manager and Senior Director of Products at Adobe Systems. He's the ultimate man responsible for ColdFusion. We've got an enormous team working for him. And we're going to talk today about the state of ColdFusion, what we can look forward to with ColdFusion 2018 that's coming out this year, and also his take on the future of ColdFusion and things that Adobe's doing there. So welcome, Tridib.
Thanks. How are you?
Doing great. So I know that you've been at Adobe for over 10 years. You've built a team of engineers and architects, project managers, sales, designers. You've got a whole team there. And I know also that you've been moving to having more data-driven decisions at Adobe. So exciting stuff. So I'm very interested to ask you about what your take is on the current state of ColdFusion.
So, let's kind of start a little bit with how I see the business as it stands right now. So, we are a 22-year-old product, and it continues to amaze me how well we continue to do on the business side. So there was a period of time about 7-8 years ago when there was this kind of a feeling that ColdFusion is dying and the business was slightly on a downward trend. But over the last few years, we've seen some tremendous growth. So just to give you some numbers. So since 2012 to 2016, we've seen a 25% growth on the business, which is roughly translates to about 6 to 7% year on year. And you must keep in mind that unlike a lot of other products, we bring out a product pretty much every 2 years. That's the cadence that we've kind of felt was right for our business and for our customers. And as I mentioned at the CF Summit in Vegas last year, I think we've had about 18 consecutive quarters where we've beat our expectations that we gave to corporate. So that's absolutely fantastic. I mean, if you look at it, it's pretty much since 2012, we've never missed our numbers. And it would have been all right if we were not missing the numbers and not growing the business, because, you can always sandbag those numbers and set yourself an easy target. But, for a business which was people were writing obituaries, to grow at 25% is fantastic. And the last couple of years, we've seen growth of 15% plus. So I think on the business side, we are really comfortable. We are very happy where it is. And that gives us, added incentive and possibly a little bit of a headroom for us to kind of sit back and say, can we do something really big? Can we do something adventurous? And we've done a few in the last few years. But we are kind of looking at what are the big things that we can do. One of the things that we looked at very recently was we saw that, what's ColdFusion all about? It's about a product which lies at the heart of your IT infrastructure. And essentially, it's a glue that holds together a lot of disparate systems. And we also looked at a scenario where the world is increasingly becoming API-driven, right? So organizations, whether it is, the giga economy or the older economies, what we were seeing is that people were starting to explore, how can I expose either my data, my intelligence, or my services to a wider audience than my immediate audience and monetize that effort. And at the core of this kind of spread was APIs. So you were opening up. So Google started the trend, Google Maps is potentially would not have been as big as it's today if not for the APIs, right? So Uber kind of leveraged Google Maps, and of course they'll possibly do something different tomorrow. But as of right now, they're leveraging Google Maps to deliver really a cool service. And that's only one of them. It's difficult today to go to any retail website where they're not showing you directions to a web page or web physical location without the directions. You and I, possibly, when we invite friends over, the easiest way to send them is a WhatsApp message with a Google map pointer, right? And saying, follow the point. And we saw that everywhere. So we decided that, like for our ColdFusion customers, and when we looked at our ColdFusion customers, we saw a very large number of them were starting to explore, how do I expose my siloed data and services to a wider audience? And sometimes the audience was internal, sometimes the audience was external. And we said, can we go out and build a really good API manager? Fully knowing that we were not the earliest bird in the block, and there were a whole range of really significant players in the market. And when we decided to build the API manager, we realized that we will clearly not be competitive with them on feature set from day one. But we said we needed to have a hook. And so the challenge to the team was, you can build the coolest looking API manager, but we are not going to go out and release the API manager into the market unless you can convince me it's the fastest API manager out there. Fastest means that the smallest amount of overhead that we add to each and every API call that is doing out there. And to be honest with you, till today, we are the only API manager out there which has a publicly published white paper on details on performance. The reason is we clearly are significantly better than most of the well-known competitors. And it gives me a lot of comfort that we've got a large number of customers which are currently going live. Some of them have actually come on CF Summit and spoken about it. And we plan to kind of expand that base over the next few years. So the other thing that obviously I kind of look at is, how are people using my software, right? So one of the things that we kind of ask people is, how are you, what are the reasons why you are still with ColdFusion? And one of the things that we found out is 80% of the people believe that it continues to be the fastest growing, fastest development platform and delivers the maximum ease of use. And we do this every year. So it was 65 few years ago, 70 last year, it's up to 80%. The next question that we would like to ask is, have you built any new applications with ColdFusion? And this year, the number was 78% of our folks are telling that they're building new applications. It's not just on maintenance. They are kind of going out and building new applications. And this is up from 70% last year. So the trends are something that is really exciting more than the exact numbers.
So that really contradicts the idea that ColdFusion is only a legacy language. If 3/4 of people are building new apps with it, that totally contradicts that.
Right, and that's one of the reasons why we do this service on a regular basis, is to kind of, we have to convince ourselves, because in case the trend lines are going the other way, then our strategy becomes different. If the trend lines are moving up, that means our customers are with us and continuing to invest in the technology, then it makes us that we need to do, like bigger and better things going forward. The other thing that we found extremely interesting is, after a long time, ColdFusion Builder is now clearly the most used IDE for ColdFusion development. 31% of the people are using ColdFusion Builder, as opposed to Sublime Text, which has now slipped to number 2 at 22. Dreamweaver, which used to be a dominating player 7-8 years ago, is now at 16%. Like then CF Eclipse, Homeside, these were, which held on for a long time. Now, as we are starting to put more resources being CF Builder, addressing some of the issues that the customers are facing, more than putting, like on performance and things like that. Those are the things that people came back and said, we don't want more features in CF Builder. Go and fix some of the performance and the usability issues. And that's what we focused on in this release. So 31%, and we are hoping that this will become a more dominating player as we go forward.
That's great. And what are the other things that you've found people are looking for in the survey of ColdFusion developers and users?
The other thing that we found is, again, the other thing that we wanted to look at is these applications that they're building, and I don't have the data offhand, but a very high percentage of the people who are building new applications are having these applications as external facing. And why I feel that external facing apps are important metric for us to track is because that shows commitment, because they are kind of getting it out and they're depending on us delivering platform performance and reliability and security when reaching out to their customers, and that's where they make their money. So two things that we keep looking at is what percentage of our applications that people are building are external facing, and what percentage of their overall application stack is on ColdFusion. And those numbers continue to increase. Just to give you a sense, percentage of ColdFusion applications that people say, or customers who say that they have external facing applications, I think it's in the 70s or early 80s. I don't have the number offhand, but it's very high. And that gives us the confidence that, like we have a good product, and we need to kind of go out and make it bigger and better.
It's always been unclear to me how many applications are external on the public web and how many are internal applications. So that's interesting to see that. What about ColdFusion 2018? What can you tell us that's exciting about that release?
So, like what can you expect? So let me just give you a sense as to how we go out and build a product. So one of the things that Rakshay, who's the product manager for ColdFusion, does is he does formal surveys, and he does that not one, but he does that staggered over a period of time. So there are no local biases that plays a role in his decision making. And one of the things that like we initially thought when we spoke to customers face to face, and we asked them the question, why does it take you so long to upgrade to the latest release of ColdFusion? Just to understand, because it's in our interest that everybody's on the latest version of ColdFusion. And we heard a lot of different stories, and we actually did do a lot of research and a lot of development to see if we can make that process very seamless. But we also realized that, like given the plethora of applications out there, it would be really difficult. It's a really difficult problem to solve. We can take care of a lot of the environmental issues, making sure parts don't collide, parts are upgraded and all those things. But no organization what it solved would still depend on an automatic process without doing a formal kiwi on their applications as they move forward. And we said that's more a comfort level than a technology problem. So while we did spend a huge amount of time and resources on that, we decided we are not going to bring that to the market. But what we found out, interestingly, was people across the board, whether they were IT managers, whether they're developers, we found that the maximum number of people in the ColdFusion ecosystem, their business KPIs or their personal KPIs had the word performance in it in some form or other. Can we make things go faster? And so we said, what, this is one area that we really need to look into. So we looked into this problem in two extremely interesting manners. One was, can we make the basic engine faster? So, like in the past, what we had done was we changed languages and we gave you language constructs, which made things go faster. But the problem with that approach was that you had to go and make code changes, right? So if you were passing things by reference, can you pass it by, if you want to pass it somewhere else, then you actually had to go and make code changes, and nobody wanted to go and change large amounts of code. So we said, can we look at the engine and can we make it faster intrinsically? So the same code will run faster. So that's one of the efforts that we had to do, right? So instead of passing by reference, passing by value, which required code changes, remember we did some stuff around scope. So going forward, that gave you, for your new applications can run faster, but we wanted to make sure can your old applications run faster. Then we also kind of asked ourselves, can we go out? We used to have this performance monitor, which used to be a feature of ColdFusion server for a really long time. And we said, can we, like we are ColdFusion, we have the ability to kind of really give you 3-4 things which only we can provide. Number one is, can we go out and tell you, in case you have a performance issue, can we drill down to the exact line of code and tell you, you know what, this line of code should be changed differently, or this SQL call needs to be made differently. Can we also, one of the things that we found out is connector tuning was a big problem sometimes. And most people do it by a little bit seat of the pants, experience and seat of the pants. And we are actually trying to look at, can we look at the data that's coming through on your connector tuning, and can we automatically tune the connectors for you and keeping it at optimal level? Like, can we change the pool size? Can we change the timeouts? All those things, can we do it automatically and keep your system working optimally for as long as possible? There will be, of course, some of the cases where things go really haywire and requires manual intervention. So we looked at performance monitor, and it's a work in progress. So we looked at performance as one, that we can auto-tune as far as possible. If not auto-tune, can we give you, like a pretty easy graphical overview of your whole system? Easily pinpoint with red, that's, like this cluster is not working, or this web server is not working, or this database server is a problem. You can then click on that element, dive into it, find out the CPU usage, throughput, etc. And not only, and this is the interesting part, we not only give you what's happening in the last 5 minutes, we can actually bring you historical data. And we can again give you historical data and say, you know what, these are the places that you've had problems. Now, do you want to switch on the code profiler, where obviously you're going to capture a lot deeper set of information? And then really dive into maybe a line of code to tell you, you know what, if you can change this SQL statement somewhere, or you need an index on this database table, that will really help matters. Those are the kind of things that we will do. We also realize that this is a 1.0 product. So we are trying to make sure that we give you as much power as possible. But clearly, this is one area that you will see a lot of innovation coming up. Like the amount of data that your log files will capture is tremendous. And we would also kind of look out, once the system gets into place, is to work with some of our customers and see if they are willing to share their data logs in an anonymized manner, where we should be then able to kind of analyze that using some kind of ML or AI techniques to do even more auto-tuning without you being bothering. And we just send you an SMS or a WhatsApp message saying, like, we fixed the problem. This was the performance parameter before, this is the CPU utilization afterwards. So that, hey, after that, we're not going to replace the person, but we're trying to go and make sure that more day-to-day rudimentary works are taken care of. So that's on the performance side, is one of the key areas that we are working on. Like distributed caching was obviously one of the big things that we wanted to kind of look at. And that's, like people use other systems. And so what we decided this time is that we are going to build in a framework where we will have some bundled distributed cache along with the product. But we will also kind of make sure that if you have a third-party distributed cache, which is not just like distributed by us, you can actually just plug that into that framework and use that and manage that and get all the reports and all that straight out of the box. So we do a lot of the plumbing and heavy lifting. All you have to do is either use the distributed cache engine that we are shipping with the product, or buy any other third party that you have and just plug it into the system. You, one of the things that we also wanted to spend a lot of time, and I think if you see in the forums has possibly got the maximum amount of attention, is a lot of work that we are doing on the OOPS, enhancing the OOPS capability of the CF language. So you'll see a huge amount of improvement or enhancements that's coming in to make it, like we've looked at, say, languages like Python and see what are they doing with the various data structures like lists and tuples, and seeing if you can bring the same richness of facilities within the system. So you'll see a lot more enhanced scenarios on OOPS. The other area that we are obviously looking at very heavily is on the language side would be the whole concept of parallel operations, right? The whole concept of promise and things like that that we are bringing into the system, which will allow you to leverage the parallel architectures and the parallel hardware that you have in your system a lot more effectively and out of the box than it was doing before. So that also has a performance angle to it, but I'll kind of put that straight into the language bucket because I think that's how people would see it going forward.
That's great. I'm kind of curious on the way you do a release. Do you run the new ColdFusion engine against actual customer code, so you can kind of regression test that when you add new features, it doesn't break, old code? Or how do you deal with that issue?
Super question. Regression, and especially with the kind of large customer base that we have to take care that the regressions are kept as minimal, if not zero, as possible. So over the last 2 years, we've actually built in automated systems. So one of the problems that we used to have with regression is that, we used to have regression suite, you run your regressions, and you end up with a lot of false positives. And so over the years, so what we've tried to do, and as human beings, when you see a lot of false positives along with negatives, it kind of biases you, and you don't kind of give the true negatives as much weightage. So one of the things that we did over the last 2 years, we built in a lot of automation on our quality engineering side to build in systems which will really give you good quality of reduce the false positives to absolutely bare minimum. Just to give you a sense, we used to have false positives maybe in the like 600, 700, 800 as numbers. Those numbers have, I think, reduced to less than 50 today. So, like when we have issues in the regression, so we can now focus on them a lot more aggressively. And so we don't have to go through, like 600 regressions to find out 50 true regressions that actually happen. So now we can actually spend time, the same amount of time, quality time on the 50 true regressions that we find out. So regression is clearly one of the things that we are focused on. We are determined to make your task of upgrading from like CF 2016 to 2018 as seamless as possible, so that any code that was working there should be working here. That's the dream. I hope that we are getting there. We are getting really close to that with 2018.
That's great. So can you give us any idea of how much code you have that you run the new engine against? Is it so many different sites or so many lines of code, or?
I'm trying to remember the data, but I can possibly send this to you. I'm trying to remember the size of the test suite.
Yeah.
It's just massive. I think we add close to, I think this release is a massive release because of the performance management system. I think the number that I heard somewhere would be in the range of 500,000 lines of code or something thereabout. So, so that's a kind of scale that we sometimes operate on. But I can get back to you on the exact data on, like lines of code that we are adding to the system this year.
Yeah, I'll put the exact information into the show notes so people can find it on the TerraTech site.
That would be,
so.
Yes.
So, but that's impressive that you do that, because I think one of the concerns I've heard with people upgrading to any new version of any software, not just ColdFusion, but anything that anyone puts out, is that, you know, there'll be bugs in the 0.0 release. And I'm wondering how you address that issue.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, when we went out and so there were two things that we got. So when we went customers face to face, this clearly was a top of the line issue that they had, migrating from release to release. But when we went out and did the survey, what we came back is they're coming back and telling us, we definitely want you to make the system better, but we don't really want you to kind of come out with a feature which is to make upgrades simple. You know, like it's not, we don't want you to have a feature which says click this button and you'll upgrade. Because what they were saying is the complexities of our systems are really massive for you to try to solve it. We have so many different, you know, like typically a customer would have between 100 to 200 applications of ColdFusion running. And they said, we will anyway have to run the quality test. If you can make sure that it breaks very few times, it makes that process go faster. So that's basically what we are trying to do. We are trying to ensure that the programs that were working or applications that were running in the previous release continues to run exactly the same way, and hopefully, as I said, run a little faster. But we would like to make sure, we've tried to ensure that it breaks as few times as possible. Like I said, it's still an aspirational dream, and we are getting closer to it. I doubt if we'll ever get to it, but we'll continue to push that needle release on release on release.
Do you measure data for that? Do you have anything that tells you how much a new version of ColdFusion breaks apps in the field? Or because I know you're really into data-driven decisions. So.
Right. So one of the things that we look at is typically we look at all external bugs pretty much on a regular basis. So me, Suresh, Vamsi, the senior leadership of the engineering team, look at this pretty much on a weekly or a fortnightly basis. And, you know, like I think 2 years ago or maybe 3 years ago, I had promised that we are going to really put our effort and engineering resources to make sure that the external bug count doesn't go out of the whack, right? And we did that. I mean, even today, one of the things that we realize when we deal with enterprises and large systems, enterprises are willing to live with maybe one feature less or one feature coming 2 months down the line. What they really get angry is when we fail to deliver on a promise that we made on a feature. So if the feature was supposed to add 2 plus 2 equal to 4, they don't want a 4.1 coming up even 2% of the time or 0.5% of the time. Those are the things that we've learned. So our endeavor is always to make sure that in case we get a bug from the field, as we call it, it's all hands on deck. We look at this on a regular basis. As you know very well, we come out with an intermediate release, which is about bug fixes and security release pretty much every 2 months or 3 months. And what is really nice to see is this, especially if it's a security release, we are starting to see a lot of traction. A lot of our community now is starting to pick them up much more aggressively than they used to do, say, maybe 2 years ago. And it's really nice to see that because we don't want the bad guys to kind of get to us before we react to it. And we like to do it on the company side. We try to make sure that you're ahead of the curve. And we definitely are seeing the community stepping forward and picking up those releases a lot more aggressively than they are. Now, they are able to pick up those releases a lot more aggressively than they were before is because of our commitment that we will not break your code. So we are, I think, being able to deliver that commitment more regularly, and that's what's giving the people the confidence that they are picking up those quarterly releases and updating and applying their patches a lot more aggressively than they were 2 years ago.
Yeah, I definitely recommend listeners apply all the patches as they come out, because that's how most security issues happen from someone who did not apply the patch. Because I think I read recently that you haven't had a day zero issue in ColdFusion for like 4 or 5 years. Is that right? Or
Yeah, I don't like to talk about it in public. Rather, I jinx this whole process. But yes, I think the last time we had it would be about 4 years ago, unfortunately on Christmas Day. So
oh.
we actually have extra people every Christmas Day just monitoring the systems and the chatbots and the security stuff, because Murphy's laws always means that it happens when we have the least number of people on deck. So yes, we are very happy. And to be honest with you, even when that 0 day happened, it happened at a customer place. And it would not have happened if the customer had followed the security notes and applied the lockdown guides and things like that. So if you kind of keep that aside, we've not had a 0 day since I've taken over the business. But again, like I said, it's really important that the customers realize this. And I talk about it in all forums. When we go out and release a security patch, we do publish a public document saying what are the patches and what kind of problems we are fixing, right? So it's open, it's out to everybody, including the bad guys, to kind of look at it. And we've actually looked at it when we had the 0 day. I think a year after that, we actually did look at it. We looked at a log of an attack that was made on a large US institution. They did not break through, but we had the log. And the log was, like it's a list of all the bugs, the last 30 or 40 bugs, patches that we had released. They essentially ran a script to test each and every patch to see if the company was not compliant, and they were waiting for it not to be compliant. So there were about 150 or 160 such things. And it was just a list of all the patch reports that we used to send out.
Tell me about, do you have a team dedicated to security on ColdFusion, or how does that work there?
So it works at multiple levels. So Adobe as a company is extremely invested right now, given the nature of our business, right? So if you know, from the nature of our business has moved from perpetual desktop licensing products where we could send it out to you and, that's it, to now our business is currently on the cloud. Very few people realize we are possibly one of the largest, if not one of the largest cloud companies out there with the digital marketing, creative cloud, and all those. Which means that security is now front and center. It's no longer a nice to have. ColdFusion feeds off that. So we have a large security team who constantly is monitoring security alerts that's coming from across the world. We obviously work with the safe security partners who are also in touch with a lot of things. So essentially the way it works is as soon as a security alert happens, we get to know about it. The product team gets to know about it pretty much in the next 5 to 10 minutes. We have a security czar within the team whose job is to kind of look at that. And it's basically all hands on deck. His first job is to essentially identify the severity of the problem. And we also work with the security team to come up with a definition, is this problem severe enough? And most of the time, even if it's not a 0 day publicly, we might say this has the potential to become a 0 day because XYZ has promised to reveal these notes in 24 hours time. So then it becomes all hands on deck, and we have to release the patch within the time frame set by what is known as the PSRT team, which is Adobe's team. Internally, what we have done is all our engineers are like green belt certified on security. So everybody out here is a green belt or a black belt on security. Everybody's been trained. We have a security czar whose job is to review each piece of code that is checked in to ensure that security practices are put in place. In spite of them, sometimes things do get through, and that's really working well. So the number of things that get escalated to my table, and I get pretty much every security issue that is done, has come down tremendously. but it will never be zero. That's the nature of the business that we are in. But yeah, so we have multiple ways. So we have a security czar, everybody in the team, developer as well as quality is trained on security. We do, and then we have the PSRT team. Before the release of our product, right, every release of ColdFusion goes through a third-party security audit. So they look at their audit, they give us a report, and it's only if they give us a thumbs up that the product is released, right? Then, of course, things like lockdown guides. One of the things that we are doing this year is, while the lockdown guide is a guide and people have to go through it, in this release of the ColdFusion, we're allowing you to just click a button and switch on the lockdown guide automatically. So we are taking over the responsibility, if you switch on that button, that we will make sure that your system is locked down. And if, of course, people sometimes want to unlock it because they want to do a few things in few directories because that's their administration job. But essentially what we are saying is you can take off a few controls, and what happens typically is when you put them back, sometimes you forget. We are just making sure that human error is reduced if you follow that process.
Do you have like part of your QA staff is focused on security internally? Like you have a team whose job is to hack into ColdFusion so you can find the problems before real hackers do?
Not just, not like I said, so we are at 3 levels. So there's a security training. So we actually most, if not all of them have gone through specialized security testing. So we have performance testing, we have security testing. These are specialized training given to people to test for these things. So on similar lines to what you talked about. Then we have the Adobe PSRT who also does it on a regular basis, right? So they kind of have a team to kind of test our scenario. And then we have the third-party organizations which comes in. And they are like professional hackers whose job is to install our product and make sure that, like assuming we lock it down, can they break into our system? So those are the 3 levels that we do.
Do you have any idea how ColdFusion compares to other languages on security?
That's a good question. So there was a research report, and I think it was, escapes my mind, it was from one of the large research consultancy companies, which rated ColdFusion as the least vulnerable enterprise class platform today. And this they got, and I will not take the sole credit for it. The credit goes also to the community because they have been aggressive in installing the patches that we sent out. Because we can send you the patches, but the testing is done based on how many attacks have been reported on their platform, right? So we can give you the software. It's only because people are installing it. So we are by far the number 1, according to that report.
Well, that's great news to hear, and something we can be proud of in the ColdFusion world. I'm curious what your approach is to containerization and Docker, because for the last few years there's been a move to deploy apps in the cloud using containers, and I'm wondering if there's anything in the horizon for ColdFusion to support that officially.
So containerization is something that we promised last November at Vegas. And if I'm not mistaken, we already have an official ColdFusion Docker image available today. If it's not, it will be made available in the next few days. I know that all the bits and pieces are there. I think it's already live, but clearly now people can go and download an official CF image from the Docker website.
That's great. And do you know if there's a change in the licensing to, work with that? Because usually things that are containerized, there's a pay per minute of use or hour of use or whatever the billing metering model is.
I know we discussed it. I can get somebody to respond to that. I don't have the answer, at least the correct answer offhand.
Okay, that's fine. When you get back to us, we'll put it in the show notes so that people can see what that is. Now, you mentioned CF Summit West there, and I know you're going to be speaking at CF Summit East in DC in about 5 weeks' time.
Right.
What are you excited about for CF Summit this year?
It's amazing how the summit continues to grow. And actually, the growth is to a large extent limited by our initial planning. So we say, okay, we'll have 600 people, and we seem to hit those numbers quite aggressively. In spite of going to see Las Vegas last year, soon after the horrific shooting that happened, and in spite of a fairly large number of cancellations that came in, we still reached a number close to 500. I think the CF Summit in DC, which was primarily meant for our large customer base in government, but we've been really surprised to see a large number of non-government customers also kind of come in and attend it. So I'm excited for 3 things. Number one is, as I tell people, I think the time has come where we are able to celebrate some of the great CF stories in the community. Now, towards that, I would like to also kind of communicate through this platform. We launched the CF community portal last year, right? So the portal's job is to do 2 things. Number one is for us to kind of keep you up to date with all the new things which is happening in the ColdFusion team. But it's a community portal supposed to be managed by community. So we would like a lot of you to come and tell your stories and share it on the community. So we don't want the community to become like a user forum, because user forums are places where people come when there's a problem and then they're looking for somebody to help you. We also want you to do that, but we also want you to come and tell us all these great stories. So we started this process, say, 2 years ago, where we said, one is for me to come and tell you what's the state of ColdFusion. What's a better compelling story is to get some of the community folks come up and tell their story. So we had people like Global Clash Card. We had people like Market America running some really large systems, right? The whole shop.com system on the ColdFusion platform as a testimony to aid the performance, reliability, and the scale that ColdFusion delivers for you. And more importantly, what we are also wanting you to come and share with us is how easily we are helping you to kind of stay up with the latest and greatest technology, right? So whether it's distributed cache, whether it is API performance monitor, we want to take the really difficult things and make it really easy for you, right? ColdFusion's base has been to make hard things made easy, right? But that's a claim, that's an aspiration from the team. Did we actually make it easy? How much productivity we brought to the table can only be shared by the community. For us to talk about it from the pulpit would be, like taking coal to Newcastle. I don't want to do that. What I want the community to come and share with us is how easily and effectively we allowed you to embrace new technology, right? And those are the stories we want you to talk about through the community portal. And that's the reason why we did. We will also use the community to kind of share, like code snippets, our learnings, and things like that. We also kind of launched this other community initiative we are doing with another partner of ours called Safe Fiddle, which is like the other, like we have various other fiddles which are out there. So there's a whole range of things that we are trying to do with the community to engage and collaborate with each other. Most importantly, we want you to share your stories with each other and give each other the confidence that you are on possibly one of the biggest and best platforms out there for web development.
That sounds great. I'm kind of curious. I know Adobe has an initiative in the education sphere where anyone in a university or college or school can get a free copy of ColdFusion for educational use for learning. Is there anything else you're doing to get new people into the ColdFusion language? Because I know that's been an issue in the past.
Yes. So one of the things that we started, and I know Rakshit has been driving that, is to sponsor colleges, community colleges, and universities to teach ColdFusion as the language medium for teaching web development. So I know we've worked with quite a few colleges in the past. We continue to engage with some of the new ones today. And the whole idea out there is that we need to catch them young. So we need to kind of make sure that when they come out of the schools and colleges, they're at least aware of ColdFusion and understand how that framework works. And more importantly, to give them a sense it's a fully functional, full-blown development platform. And it's not something just to make some small bits and pieces. Some of the world's largest applications are running on this platform. This process actually to the community, we did announce, I think 2 years ago, that anybody who kind of introduces us to their local community colleges where they teach or they have relationships with, and the community colleges engage with us, there's a free Apple iPad, I think, which is on offer that we had made at the CF Summit. So that offer is still there, and we are looking for spreading our wings. We actually do have a fully functional video-based training material available on ColdFusion, right? And I think it's for, I think 40 hours or 50 hours video we have. So we have the content. We need introductions to your local community colleges or your local universities, and we can possibly engage with the CS departments or their, like MCA departments to see how we can get ColdFusion into those colleges.
Well, that sounds great. So I'm excited to see more younger people involved in ColdFusion. I'm kind of curious, you've been involved with ColdFusion for, I think, about 10 years now. Why are you proud to be involved with ColdFusion?
If you look at pretty much all the businesses that I look after at Adobe, one of the things that we try to do in all the businesses is to democratize this whole process of information technology. I think ColdFusion does a fantastic job. Like if you look at when it started off as a tag-based languages, and you look at where it is today, it's amazing that we took a tag-based language, I guess, influenced by HTML and those things, and build an ecosystem and a platform which is second to none on performance and reliability. I think it's fantastic. We had some data to say that when people are able to get developers from PHP, C++, or Ruby and other platforms onto ColdFusion and make them fully functional developers in less than 2 to 3 months. And I think the reason why they're able to do that is because of the strength of the language and the paradigm that we have. So the ability for people without formal computer science background to come into this system was the original goal of ColdFusion. And we continue to do that, except now we talk about, like really higher end concepts of ColdFusion or computer science being delivered through the same paradigm. I think it's fantastic that we are able to do that for 22 years. I think a lot of people possibly would not have been developers today if not for ColdFusion, right? So we clearly are making a change there. The second area, I think, which makes sense, and you talked about data. One of the things I keep going out and when I meet customers is, are we delivering development productivity to your organization? And it is amazing to see how massive applications are often being managed by 3 to 4 people because of the effectiveness and the productivity that we are able to deliver. And that's one of the promises that we will continue to focus on. We want to we continue to remain the fastest development platform out there for enterprise class web development.
That is
these
great.
Are two things really keeps me A, inspired, and B, it kind of, that's a hard problem that we continually would like to solve.
So the final question I have for you, we talked a little bit about how 8 years ago people thought ColdFusion was dying. And, part of the reason for having this ColdFusion Alive podcast is I believe that ColdFusion is alive and growing, and it can be used as a very modern language, better than any of the other languages out there. So I'm kind of curious, this is my question for you. What would it take to make ColdFusion even more alive this year?
I don't know what's to make it more alive this year. I think I kind of look at it as a 3-year thing. And I kind of ask myself, when I talk to my customers, right? So I have 2 challenges. Number one is, how do I get new customers on the scenario? And we can kind of continue to do reasonably well on that platform. Once I get a customer, how do I sell deeper into his or her organization? Which means if an application is to be built in the organization, am I increasing the chance of my ColdFusion team bagging that project than somebody else? So to do that, I need to continually ask myself, what is the problems that they're facing? And when I look ahead, I think there are 3 challenges that I see which we have not addressed or we have not done well. I think our initial flirtation with mobile a couple of years ago was an interesting one. And I think we will possibly relook at that and see, can we do a much better job? Right? So mobile development will continue to be front and center. Mobile first will continue to remain interesting. And we want to see if we can play a more interesting role than we are doing today. Cloud, people are going to cloud much more aggressively than they were doing yesterday. And that will be more true tomorrow than it's today. We are trying to understand, and it's interesting because I do manage a cloud application, which is Captivate Prime, which is a large enterprise class LMS, which we have. And we constantly ask ourselves, what are the challenges that we have, right? From a purely cloud deployment point of view. And we are going to kind of look at that question very eagerly to see, can we solve some of those issues that people are facing when they go to cloud through ColdFusion, right? The third one is again interesting. Like you can't kind of do a podcast today without using the word AI and ML and data sciences and stay relevant. And I think I've used that word at least once in this whole podcast. Trying to see what can we do in that space. So cloud data and mobility would be 3 big challenges that all my customers have. No promises which one will pick up, but what we are focused on this time is whichever one that we pick up, we want to make a non-linear impact to my customer's life. So it won't be incremental. We want to completely help him to reimagine how he approaches any of these 3. So that's the goal that we have.
Great. Well, if people want to find you online, Tridib, how's the best way? What are the best ways to do that?
So my email is reasonably public, and I will share with you my email address. That's possibly the best way to do so. I'm on Facebook, but like on Facebook, I'm a very political and a sporting animal. So I love sports and I like politics. So you'll see a lot of that. LinkedIn is another area. So I'm on LinkedIn, so they can reach out to me on LinkedIn. And a lot of ColdFusion community members are on my connections in LinkedIn. So Tridib Roy Chowdhury on LinkedIn, Tridib Roy Chowdhury on Facebook. And I can share with you my email ID, which is tchowdhu@adobe.com. But I will let you know, Michaela's, and you can put it on your podcast notes.
Great. Well, thanks so much for coming on the show today, and good luck with your talk at CF Summit East, which is coming up April 25th in Washington, D.C.
Yes, I'm looking forward to another extremely successful summit and meeting a whole bunch of folks from the community. And I'm actually looking forward to meeting a lot of the community folks on the community portal. So please engage, share your stories, and collaborate with each other. I think that's what we are looking for. And thanks, Michaela, for inviting me.